Alright, hello everybody. This is XP Scaling, and I'm happy and also excited to announce today we will be covering Oroch Doppo. So please note, some of these few early feats are essentially Oroch Doppo in his prime, and it should be noted that he states that he's actually 55, but despite being 55, he's actually still in his prime and actually hasn't lost any strength over the course of time. And, just to give you guys an example as to what he should be capable of, these first few feats should be more so like a baseline as to what he's capable of. So with that out of the way, Oroch Doppo, his sneaking skills have shown to be completely, top notch, as he was able to sneak up on this heavyweight world-class fighter and essentially ended this man's whole career in at least 3 hits, right? Dodges the first initial hit, gives him a groin shot, uppercuts his nose off, and gives him a mean punch into the chest. And he was able to hit this guy so hard that a bruise started to appear in the middle of his back. So, for a quick reference, let's say this guy, even though he's a wrestler, he is, still a world-renowned fighter. So, let's say he hits with the force of at least, a heavyweight boxer. That would be at least around, 5,000 newtons. Sorry, guys. But, let's say he wanted to hit with, at least a ton. That would be at least 9,000 newtons. Yet, despite this guy potentially having this level of strength, Oroch Doppo essentially, just destroyed him in at least 3 hits, right? So later on, he would meet a swordsman who he states should be extremely impressive, as he killed 14 men armed with guns before. And, as he's here meeting with this guy, the guy gives him a quick demonstration with how fast and precise he is with his sword, as he cuts down 2 flies at the exact same time with perfect efficiency and accuracy. Yet despite that, Oroch Doppo, honestly, because, he's a real one, he was so disrespectful, he shoved his toes into this man's nose and dodged a point blank cut from this guy before it could even land. And even after this guy actually did get serious for this guy, doing that to him, Oroch Doppo states, "Oh man, now I get it. This is exactly what you mean. Against this kind of power, up close, even a gun wouldn't stand a chance." Yet, despite the guy actually going in for a strike, Oroch Doppo proved to be tactical enough to lift up the floorboard and, used it more so as a distraction before he went in and countered the guy. So, based on the, scene, you could honestly put, even if you wanted to lowball this feat, at, subsonic, or at least, around 383.3 miles per hour. But if we take the guy as what he was stated to do, defeat armed men with guns, or at least, baseline just like a pistol, you could put this honestly at bullet level, or, supersonic. That would be at least Mach 2.5, or, numbers wise for miles, at least 1,854.42 miles. So sometime later, right, he decided to, do some training on an island. And, he was shown to be so dangerous, Doppo, that even a wild Siberian tiger, when getting a drink of water, would preferably not fight him, right? As he's been here on this island for 27 days, and when he gets this drink of water, we get this statement: the enemy in front of me is a strong one. That's probably what they're both thinking. When living in the wild, you should never rush towards danger. If you are able to move without your life being in danger, you should do so and avoid any unnecessary conflicts. So this tiger, despite, being honestly, in today's modern time, being one of the top elite hunters in the world, in the animal kingdom, looked at Doppo and said, "Yeah, nah, I'm not trying to throw the hands yet, right?" And despite that, this tiger decided, I better eat. But instead of trying to eat Orochi Doppo, it ate every living thing on the island before it would even consider the idea of trying to attack Orochi Doppo, right? And then when the tiger was honestly coming up and trying to sneak up right behind Doppo, it was contemplating to itself, he's strong, isn't he? But he looks delicious. He won't be easy prey, but he looks delicious. Perhaps the one who will be feasted upon shall be me, but he still looks delicious. And Orochi Doppo, Doppo, he gives a quick little explanation as to why, even though the tiger would challenge him, it had to be in the right state of mind. So, and based off of this, we could imply that a tiger would only do so if it was obviously forced to fight. So, this would mean that even if, say, a tiger was in the mood for a fight, or in this case was actually trying to hunting, it naturally would not try to go towards someone as dangerous as Doppo, right? As we see here, but fighting a tiger that isn't starving just won't do. He has to be hungry. Driven by hunger puts him in the right state of mind. It doesn't mean anything if their lust for blood doesn't match mine. See, this is what they would call a cornered cat becomes as fierce as a lion. So, to elaborate this, the tiger obviously naturally would not want to fight Orochi Doppo. But obviously, its, nature as a tiger would make it do so if it was in the right state of mind, being that it wants to eat, it wants to survive. So the only way a tiger, or heck, even a lion, or potentially even a bear would fight Orochi Doppo would be if it's in a more survivalist instinct mode, right? As in, it wants to preserve its own life, so it's gonna try to, attack Orochi Doppo and try to eat him. Sadly for the tiger, this is what happened to the tiger in one of its hits, and essentially getting hit by, Doppo. And gets, uppercutted by him, essentially destroying its jaw and teeth, and gets a mean, kick to the groin, and Doppo just, completely kills it with a karate chop, right? Kind of sad. So, honestly, Doppo should easily be dangerous enough to fight. Oh my goodness, sorry. Honestly, based off of this feat, Doppo should honestly be easily dangerous enough, and even strong enough to kill things like tigers, bears, potentially lions too, based off of this feat alone. And so sometime later, after, running from PETA, Doppo would fight a blind man, but this blind man, even though he's blind, he's actually a very dangerous fighter, as Doppo states, it's like fighting a real master. And even as he's getting beaten up, he actually analyzes the guy and analyzes how this guy's attacking him and how he's actually beating him. He states here, if you lose one sense, all your other senses will be heightened. He's strong. We were so close, our noses damn near touched, and he could still kick like that. He used the sound of my voice to calculate my height and pinpoint my location. The sound that I produced as I hit the ground to calculate the amount of weight that was being pressed down. That strong voice of his, and again to show how dangerous this guy actually is, when he punched this tree, left this, honestly, what looks to be like a burnt mark, as you could even see a little bit of steam coming from it. Right? And despite being countered and actually almost knocked out by the guy, decided to essentially take this fight a little seriously and used his knowledge of pressure points to cure the man's blindness. So please note, even if you want to, lowball his knowledge on pressure points, you could just say, he should know at least around, 300 pressure points in the human body. And one of the pressure points that he's aware of can actually cure blindness. As after he gets this mean kick to the neck, he looks like he's unconscious. And he says, well, it hasn't really been a real fight up till now, has it? And completely counters this guy. And he states, wow. Mentally to himself, he's here, like, there are about 365 auto points on the human body. And by performing acupuncture, you can actually improve one's eyesight. And again, restore this guy's, sight. Even though this guy did want to be, blind, so Orochi gave him back his, blindness. But, this should also show the kind of knowledge that Orochi could use mid-fight if, he wants to take down an opponent. He could just easily, acupuncture them and boom, bring them down. Now, this next feat is more so a side note I'm going to let you guys know in real quick. As apparently, Orochi Doppo got involved in underground fighting that involved real estate. As you see here when he's talking to Mr. Takagawa, I've never heard of this before. It's a kind of betting match. People put up hundreds of millions of yen by betting real estate. Strength alone makes the winner. So wait, guys who have my mindset. Indeed, both send representatives instead of fighting themselves. So based off of this, honestly, you could just say that this is like a reference to Kengan Asura. But based on the next feat that I'm going to show you guys, it's more so like Orochi Doppo was a representative, but like, I'm going to say it like this, he obviously wasn't in the Kengan matches. And I'm more so telling you guys this feat as, there are some people like myself who wondered, how would it be if Kengan Ashura met Baki? So obviously, some people feel that, Baki verse would just stomp. Some people feel, even the top fighters from the Kengan verse would only be mid-tiers. But, I'm not going to sleep on the Kengan verse. And hopefully sometime down the line, I do want to, make a matchup having two fighters from both verses, go against each other. But to show you guys, how dangerous, honestly, perhaps some of the lower Kengan Asura people are. Honestly, like, when they initially found out Orochi Doppo was fighting they put him in just one of their betting matches. Now, not to, downplay Orochi Doppo, but honestly, like, that should be considerably impressive for the Kengan verse, just off of that alone. If they are in the same verse, apparently, because, they've been making references to each other, so this should honestly just be very impressive. And now I'm going to get back, this was just like, a little side note real quick. So the guy he goes up against, one of the representatives, he's had at least 70 wins and 3 losses, but only 10 official wins. So that would mean this representative's, he's had at least 80 wins in terms of how many fights he's been in for the, the real estate auctions, right? And, based on, his physique and based on how he's really, been at it. And he's, really top notch. But despite that, honestly, Doppo just takes notes and just comments on how he fights. He's just like, his stance. Though his palms are open, he's aligned to attack. He has a pretty well done joint kick. Honestly, I'd say he's about the level of a black belt in karate. Here we go. He doesn't even seem surprised by this guy, and this guy also doesn't even seem surprised by Doppo, as Doppo actually does give this guy a bloody nose through a headbutt and gets, thrown to the floor, and again shows to just, not even be that surprised, gets slammed down, and potentially is even surprised and not even bothered by having, a rib or two broken. After, being mounted by this guy, he proceeds to destroy this man with a very terrible, counter. He goes for this guy's bad eye, crushes his manhood, proceeds to break and dislocate his jaw, kicks this guy so hard that it cuts off his left ear and just knocks the guy out, essentially. And please note, this should be from a younger, less experienced Oroch Doppo, as we're now going to get onto some of the more, modern scaling for him. So, like I mentioned before in one of my previous videos, Oroch Doppo, as a demonstration, put himself inside of a concrete pipe and completely pulverized it and turned it into dust with his strikes. More so as a, demonstration as to what he should be still capable of, right? When Sadan got a little feisty, hugged him a bit too hard, ended him. Sadan isn't really that important. Real quick, he met one of his students who would actually be in the maximum tournament arc. Despite that, completely blitzed him and just, made fun of him. And he also could have just popped his eyes out, but, he decided against it. Would later on actually be challenged by Yujiro. And please note, Yujiro was able to knock out Baki with a finger. Yet Doppo was able to actually harm Yujiro, as he does take, a strike from Yujiro, blocks it, and he actually does bleed. Yet despite that, Yujiro is just like, well, I see you haven't actually neglected your training. All it would take would be one more step, and my heart actually would have been ripped apart. Just to give you guys just how dangerous Doppo is. So, that was just like, a little example as to what they could both do. This is more than likely, they're both holding back at this point. So, essentially, Doppo, obviously, in the series, he has a karate program. And his karate program's so successful that has at least 1 million students who actually participate in his style of karate. So, out of the 1 million students, they've selected the top 12 who were permitted to actually fight him. Yet despite having the top 12 students out of the 1 million participants who practice his style of karate, he proceeds to one-shot and, not brutalize them, but take them all down, more so as a demonstration and as an example as to how skilled he should be. And after a little, after essentially challenging Baki to a sparring match, gets kicked in the groin. Despite that, he's shown to be perfectly fine, as he actually has a technique that allows him to pull his testes up, the family jewels up to where his abs are, so he wouldn't get hurt. And much like how, the scaling should be going now, as he was able to have a little tussle with Yujiro, he completely embarrassed Baki in their, little sparring match. He even told Baki and kind of telegraphed the kinds of attacks that he was going to do. And Baki just was unable to counter and even put up a defense as to what was going to happen. So, honestly, this should be just exceedingly impressive, considering the fact that Baki at this point in time should be 3 times stronger than what he was when he was at least 13. So, essentially, despite being at least in the supersonic, potentially even supersonic plus ranges of speed, or at least Mach 2.5 to actually Mach 5 speeds, Doppo still embarrassed Baki with his attacks, even after he telegraphed and essentially told him what he was going to do. And when his match started with Yujiro, actually blitzed him and surprised him with his speed, and actually choked him so hard that Yujiro had to resort to slamming himself on the ground to try to knock Doppo off. And Doppo, just in terms of strength, real quick, completely blindsided Yujiro, and with his strikes actually knocked him back, and again nearly knocked him down. And even after being thrown by Yujiro, completely jumped back and again was able to counter Yujiro perfectly. So, obviously, his little fight with Yujiro, or this little beginning scuffle, should be just extremely impressive, given as, in some of my previous scalings for Yujiro, bare minimum, even if you wanted to say Yujiro was weak, you could say he's at least in the city block levels of strength, though it's more than likely he's in the multi-city block levels of feats, right? But what makes this honestly just extremely impressive is the fact that this Yujiro that Doppo is fighting now is a much stronger Yujiro compared to what he was when he fought. Honestly, compared to what he was in my previous video or when he fought, that 13-year-old Baki. So if we go off how strong Doppo is now, it's more than likely he could actually defeat, if not outright stomp, the Yujiro who fought 13-year-old Baki all those years ago. So as their fight begins, Yujiro and Doppo, as they were testing the waters, Yujiro counters Doppo with a very deadly family technique. It's not his family, but it's more so a fighting style that he mastered, as it's actually a secret fighting style. I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, but it's the Undi. Oh my god. That sounds terrible, guys. Sorry. But essentially, the fighting style, it's a secret fighting style that was passed down only to the elder sons of this royal family. Its greatest characteristics is said to be its walk, as it's said to have an indomitable in its median line. As its median line is obtained with absolutely no side. Therefore, there are no openings. Enemies who recklessly attack him will be, countered. So despite Yujiro having this very deadly family fighting style that he apparently learned, Doppo was actually happy that he got to experience the technique on him, as he actually wanted to experience it himself and was actually able to counter Yujiro after only seeing it once. As when Yujiro tries to go use it again, Yujiro, as you could see here, based on his sweat, he's actually surprised. And when he tries to go in for the attack, he actually perfectly counters Yujiro. And again, he proceeds to give him a few more deadly hits to his ribs. Even though this, counter doesn't really bring down Yujiro. And to give you guys, how he was able to as to how he was able to negate Yujiro's technique. With the Undundi, you show no opening and let the enemy attack you, upon which you strike from a blind spot. It's a technique where if you It's a technique where if you penetrate into a dead space, the means of escape will open. Against that, walk Doppo's Maru stance. Oh my goodness. Essentially, Doppo's stance is like an iron wall against it. If you enter into the interval and attack like that, you'll get trapped, and there's no point that you are in an over. Essentially, you get trapped, and at that point you're in an overwhelming disadvantage. So due to Yujiro's brutality, he ends up reacting involuntarily. So essentially, he created he countered Yujiro to the point where even when Yujiro would attack, react due to how he reacts involuntarily, it would end up being against him. If that makes sense. So, sorry guys if that, kind of sounds a little mumbled up. So, due to how Yujiro attacks, when he would go in for the, attack, it would essentially be a trap, and due to how he just attacks involuntarily, it would actually work against Yujiro. So after Yujiro, it ends up showing off how fast he is and how, deadly he is as a fighter, Yujiro is actually put on the defensive, but when he's put on the defensive, he actually uses, again, another technique that he's aware of. And this technique was so effective that, defensive-wise, that was actually able to hurt Yujiro's wrist. And its name is the Sangan, right? So, in ancient times, in the place known as the heartland of karate, monks were using this Indian art of self-defense that lets you look in all directions to repel countless numbers of arrows coming from all directions. It's the legendary art. So, essentially, when he used this technique, he was so confident in it that he actually made fun of Yujiro. and to give you guys where it came from. You know, the hint of the technique was obtained from the movements of the chameleon's eyes. To administer the movement of the eyeballs, you have to practice perfect control of the eye sinews, as though it's theoretically possible. And when, as you could see based off Yujiro's, reaction here, he's just like, what's wrong, Yujiro? Why'd you stop trying to pummel me, bro? And again, when he used the technique again, actually used it to the point where Yujiro's wrists were actually bleeding. So this should be exceedingly impressive, as this is honestly one of the few times we actually do see Yujiro bleed in the entire series. And actually had Yujiro countered to the point where he was actually cornered. And his techniques were so good that he actually embarrassed Yujiro and actually had him question, why can't I dodge? Essentially, right? And gave him a mean right hook. It was at this point, sadly, that, Yujiro decided to hit the I win button and, and was actually forced to use his demon back. And it was actually once this happened that, sadly, Doppo had to endure being essentially shoulder thrown by his pinky and again endured being hit so hard that his flesh came off. And, he actually did have a technique which probably could harm Doppo. Harm Yujiro, as it was aimed for his ribs and potentially actually could have killed Yujiro, but sadly Yujiro was too fast for him and was capable of countering him before that could actually happen. As you can see here, his eardrums essentially burst. So after essentially, taking this vicious counter from Yujiro, he's still shown to have the determination to get up. And to give you guys an example as the kinds of injuries he has in terms of fractures, obviously, one in his right pinky, two in his right forearm, one in his left forearm, one in his right upper arm, two left ribs, and one in his mandible. Incomplete fractures of his bones. He has at least one right forearm, two left upper arm, and one right and left femur each. He has at least 8 lacerations, 28 bruises, and brain hemorrhage, as well as both eardrums have been damaged. And despite stating, as if that would stop me, he sadly, gets his eye popped out, and Yujiro actually uses a technique that he didn't think he would have to use to essentially kill Doppo, as Doppo actually dies standing, right? Luckily, though, he was saved by Dr. Shinogi, who actually happened to be the world's best doctor, and it actually did take him only 2 months of recovery to actually get back to full strength. So if we go off a quick recap real quick as to what Doppo has shown. He's shown to just passively be dangerous enough for even a wild Siberian tiger would rather be on the verge of starving to death than to actually have to fight him. Has shown to be faster than people who are more dangerous than people with guns. And has shown to also be level-headed enough to actually analyze somebody while he's being heavily beaten down. Has extended knowledge on various pressure points in the human body. Is more skilled than Baki, despite Baki being compared to martial arts that have been around for bare minimum at least a couple hundred years, and embarrassed him. He would go on further to challenge, Yujiro, and initially was, in terms of strength and speed, equal to him, and actually out-finessed him due to the various skills in karate that he had obtained. And, he more than likely has absolute knowledge in the various kinds of karate and kinds of karate styles that are out there. So, based off of this and based off what I told you guys a little earlier, in terms of, honestly, speed, he should easily be in the bullet level, more than likely supersonic plus. in terms of just strength and seen as, his durability should scale to his strength. He should easily be in the city block, more than definitely multi-city block, as he was able to fight a much stronger Yujiro. And in terms of skill, finally, honestly, in terms of karate, he's like the absolute in karate, as not only does he know conventional karate, he knows various techniques developed by karate practitioners over the course of many years. And he's been practicing karate for at least 50 years, as he started it at the age of 5. So that's it for Orochi Doppo. I hope you guys enjoyed. I look forward to actually scaling, some of the other characters in the Maximum Tournament arc. One of my big ones that I'm really going to look forward to is obviously Jack Hammer, aka Jack Hanma. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys dislike, unsubscribe, and please leave a hate comment. I'm sorry about, my lack of English and how bad I speak. And please have a nice one. Bye.